Usually when we're planning service, good morning, time to sing, I will choose a hymn, and either our minister, Reverend Mary, or our guest minister will say, I've never heard that song before. And I'll say, well, we've sung it before. Because I take pride in the fact that we've sung almost everything in the hymn book. Well, we haven't. And Reverend Monica selected a hymn, and I looked at it and went, we've never sung that hymn. How did I miss that? In the gray hymnal, hymn number 51, it's called Lady of the Seasons of Laughter. And who would just flip by that title? I guess I did. So let's rise, and we're going to sing a little bit of Lady of the Season of Laughter for the first time. Here's an Olympia OUUC premiere. I'll give you a little introduction into it. Isn't that pretty? Thank you, Reverend Monica. Here we go. Lady of the season's laughter, in the summer's warm beneath, when the winter follows after, teach our spirits not to fear. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the journey near. Another verse, sister. Sister of the evening starlight, in the falling shadows stay, here among us till the far light of tomorrow's dawning day. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning day. How you doing? Mother. Mother of the generations, in whose love all life is worth, everlasting celebrations bring our labors safe to earth. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning earth. Goddess. Goddess of all time's progression, stand with us when we engage. Hands and hearts to end oppression, writing history's fair page. Hold us in your steady mercy, Lady of the turning age. Just like you've always known it. Thank you. Please have a seat. Good morning. Welcome to the Olympia UU congregation. Our community envisions an interconnected world that's loving, just, and healthy. We commit to live out our mission of welcome and wonder, embrace and empower, to bridge and become. Thank you for joining us today. You're welcome here exactly as you are. You don't need to be any different. Whomever you love, whatever you believe, in all the ways you're becoming the person you're out to be. My name is Kurt Hill. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a member of the Worship Arts Committee. Leading worship with me today is our consulting minister, Reverend Monica Jacobson-Tennessen, Troy Fisher, our music director, and Reverend Sarah Lewis, the Director of Community and Faith Development. Reverend Monica is joining OUUC for the year. Her primary ministry is with the Community UU Church in Pasco, Washington, and she lives near Vancouver, Washington, with her spouse, tween, and 2 cats. Here's a few things you should know about our service this morning. We're Zooming live, we're Zooming. We are Zooming live on Zoom. Who knew? And YouTube, and the service is being recorded. From here in the sanctuary, you'll see those great subtitles. Sometimes they're really creative and good for a laugh. Over here, we have fluffy chairs and activities for your hands so everyone can be comfortable. We are a multi-generational community, and we value our young ones. Kids, babies, and teens are welcome in the sanctuary. There's a nursery care and story time program for children in the classroom wing. There will be a youth group meeting in the youth meeting room, go figure, right? To explore the theme of justice at 11:30 for youth in middle or high school with a light lunch served. We're grateful for the many hands that make service and worship happen this morning. Thank you to all who contribute in so many ways. After the service, everyone will have a chance to discuss reflection questions offered by Reverend Monica. For those online, we invite you to go to a breakout room for a virtual coffee chat. For those in person, please feel free to stay for coffee and fellowship in the Commons. At 11:30, after the coffee chat, please return to the main room or sanctuary for an all-volunteer training and hands-on clinic on tech stuff, Zoom, Google Drives, the TV carts, and more. Sounds awesome, right? Families, kids, and folks of all ages are invited to the OUUC Nature Group Walk this coming Saturday at 9 a.m., meeting at Nisqually Wildlife Refuge. RSVPs and questions, please get to Reverend Sarah. Everyone is invited to Take a Leap of Faith on Thursday, February 29th at 5:30 p.m. The dinner will be hosted by the OUUC Board of Trustees, serving soup, salad, and homemade bread. Following the dinner, stay for a special presentation of music and storytelling about faith, risk, and OUUC. This Leap Day celebration is the official launch of the 2024-25 Stewardship Drive. Come support all that we love at OUUC. There are many things happening at OUUC. Check out the Tuesday electronic update or the website for the most up-to-date information. Now, let us open our hearts and minds as we prepare for worship. It is good to be together. Yeah. Okay, this morning, we join Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world in lighting a chalice, the symbol of our faith tradition. If you're online and have a chalice or candle, please join me as we light our chalices together with the words of Reverend Cynthia Landrum. Flame of our faith, call us into the community of love and justice this morning and every morning.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Monica, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a short, white woman with graying, light brown hair, and I'm in my early 40s, so you can decide if that makes me young or old or middle-aged. It's like being a Rorschach test when you're in your 40s. Our opening words this morning come from the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin. Come, let us enter in to this space of hope and community. Come, let us enter this space with our sorrows, our joys, our passion and compassion. Come, let us enter this space with the stories of our ancestors, for their strength and wisdom beats in our hearts. Come into this space, present to the beloved companions who move beside us. Come into this space, mindful that together we are building a future for the generations. Come into this space and let us worship.
And let's worship through song again. Out of the Teal Hymn Book, hymn number 1001, Breaths. There it is up on the screen. I give you some options. There's the melody. Or the harmony, which stays a sixth apart for the whole song. I call that interval the interval of love, because every love song is an interval of a sixth. So you could be down here. For the whole song. Or you could make up a rhythmic bass line. And it goes like this. Bum, 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 bum. Now don't rush, take your time. Lay it back. Here we go. One, ready, and bum, 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 bum. And you could navigate in between. You could do some melodies, some harmonies, some bum, bum, bum. But let's have some fun. Let's stand up and sing. We'll start out with the bass line, and then I'll bring us in on the words. 1, 2, 3, 1, ready. Bum, 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 bum. Here we go. To things and to beings, listen more often to things than to beings. The ancestors when the fires burn to turn. 'Tis the ancestors breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the rustling trees. They are in the groaning woods. They are in the crying grass. They are in the moaning rocks. The dead are not under the earth. Here we go. Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more
Wasn't that fun? Thank you. Have a seat.
Good morning. So one of the important things that Unitarian Universalists do is to seek the truth in love. That's a phrase that we like to use a lot. And maybe it seems simple to seek the truth in love. Anybody here feel like they've got that totally figured out? Yeah. Well, what if, as you're seeking the truth in love, you find out that a story as you knew it wasn't actually that whole story? Or you find out that a truth that you thought you knew is a little bit different than you realized. Something like this happened to the author of this story that I have to tell today. Now, David, our author, was known in his family as the person who knew the most about the family history and the most about their ancestors. It had been his grandfather before him, and then his father, but now David was the expert in all the family stories. And he had inherited a lot of wonderful family history, but he also liked to research and learn even more. And things had changed a lot since his grandfather had been researching the family. Like, in his grandfather's time, he had to take time off work, he had to travel somewhere, and then he had to go look for actual paper records and dig through them, looking at people's names. And now, David could do almost all of that from home on his computer with the push of a button. And on one day in 2006, David found out that there was a record from 1770 that was searchable online now. And he was very excited, so he went on to this record and he put in his ancestors' names and looked them up. And he found one of his ancestors. And that ancestor had been living in a small town in Rhode Island with 4 enslaved people in his household. And this was the first time David had ever heard that anyone in his family had owned enslaved people. This was a big surprise. No one had ever talked about it. And he thought about this. Why had his family not told this story? And then he was also surprised that there had been enslaved people in the North. David had always imagined that this only happened in southern states. But no, actually, people were held as slaves in the northern states for 200 years. And David sat with all of this new information about his family, and it felt weird. It felt like the story had changed. But it also felt really important to seek the truth and to know what was this story that no one was telling. And so David kept researching. And he found out that not only had some of his ancestors had enslaved people with them in the American colonies, but that one of his ancestors was actually the captain of a ship that brought people from Africa to be enslaved in the colonies. And this was really hard for David to hold and to think about. The more he did, though, he felt like he still needed to explore this story. And so he decided to take a trip to Africa and to see the place where this would have happened. Now, many of these buildings where people were held in captivity before being put on ships are still standing. And David walked in the places where likely his ancestor walked and felt his relationship with this story changing. It was still a horrible, horrible history, and it was still deeply, deeply sad. But he felt that it was important to tell the story and not to be so ashamed that he hid the story anymore. He wanted to bring the story and the truth forward. So when he got back from this trip, he decided that it would be, his next step would be to find some descendants of the people who had been held in slavery by his ancestors. And he wanted to find out what their stories were and their history and their families. Now, this is when David realized that it's a lot harder to do research on African American family histories because many of the records weren't kept in the official government records. But many African American families kept their own records. And so David had to learn new ways of doing research. And he did. And he finally found a person whose last name was the same as his ancestor's last name, and started to think maybe this was one of the people who had been held in slavery by his ancestor. He researched more, found out, yes, they were, and then traced their descendants all the way down to the present day, and found a descendant who he could call and talk to. So he called Pat, who lived in New York City, and he shared the history that he had discovered. He was a little nervous. It's a big conversation to have. But Pat was really happy to find out this other side of the history, and they compared notes on what they knew about their family histories. And they continued to have this conversation. And then they started having the conversation with other people who were the descendants of either enslavers or enslaved, and had a chance to bring more stories out into truth. This was an important step for David in seeking the truth in love. Thus ends our story for today. Thank you for listening.
Each Sunday, we engage in the spiritual practice of generosity and gratitude by joining together in service of our community and to something greater than ourselves. We each have the power to share, and when we combine our gifts to create an offering together, we're able to do much more than any of us can do alone. If you're new or visiting us for the first or second time, you're our guest. We don't expect you to contribute. However, if you're moved to do so, your generosity, your gift is gratefully received. The offering collected here this morning does two things. First, it supports the ongoing work of OUUC, the congregation, which is supported by your regular pledges. This offering also supports an organization that serves our community that's in harmony with our Unitarian Universalist values. Our Share of the Plate organization this month is the Medical Equipment Bank. The Equipment Bank provides support and equipment to individuals as they move towards building physical and mental strength. The Equipment Bank provides both The Equipment Bank provides both, let me start that again. The Equipment Bank provides support and equipment to individuals as they move towards building physical and mental strength, independence, and overall well-being so they can remain in their homes. This organization is under the umbrella of the Thurston County Council on Aging and the publisher of the Senior News that provides over 18,000 publications a month to Thurston, Mason, and Lewis counties. The Medical Equipment Bank is completely supported by volunteers, donated equipment, supplies, grants, and cash donations. Donations of equipment should be made directly to their facility on Martin Way. May the offering now be generously given as it is gratefully received.
Glory, 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 hallelujah.
Thank you, choir. Thank you, Troy. Thank you all for your generous gifts. We came together this morning bringing all that is in our lives. Let's open our hearts to the complexity of life as we place stones in the water of community. You will hear a drum beat as we begin today. It brings into our awareness that our individual hearts beat, and together we create the heartbeat of community. Right now, I invite you to take a breath as we open our hearts to receive the complexity of all that is in our lives and our communities today. Beth Johnson shares that she and life partner Lee Doyle will celebrate 25 years together on February 19th. Beth says, "It has never been dull." Beth and Lee, congratulations on your anniversary, and may you have many more. For those who are joining us online, I invite you to share from your heart by entering in the chat. Those in the sanctuary will be able to see your sharing on the screen. For those who are here in person today, I invite you to come forward if there is something that you would like to bring into the community. You may place a stone in the water as you hold your sharing in your heart. Please come up through the side aisle and return by the center aisle. Let us feel the heartbeat of community and reach out our hearts in love and care to all those who share. We place a stone in the water for all that has been shared online, shared from the heart. And we place one more stone in the water for all that we hold in our hearts, which remains unspoken. Please take a moment to situate yourself in whatever way is comfortable for you for a movement meditation. This may mean choosing to rise where you are, whether in the sanctuary or at home. It may mean angling yourself a little bit so you can move your arms without crashing into your neighbor. It may mean choosing to close your eyes and visualize the movements while remaining still, whatever is best for you. This is a body prayer I learned at General Assembly one year when Reverend Stevie Carmody and the National Youth Group led it during youth worship. Knowing that one ancestry, one heritage to which we are all connected is our UU history and our UU present. This is a series of movements of our bodies to remind us of the values and the theologies that we draw from in our Unitarian Universalist tradition. We remember the transcendent wonder of the universe. Go ahead and lift your hands if you'd like. The awe we feel when we gaze at the starry sky and the wonders of nature. We remember that each of us is inherently worthy and sacred. Put your hands over your heart. And nothing can ever take that from us. We remember that we are part of an interdependent, interconnected web. Put your hands up. Hold that web. That we cannot do this alone, and we need to bind together in community to make the world a more just place. We remember that part of our tradition is action. Open your hands up. That we are here to do justice and service together so that we can live in a more loving world. And we come to our center with prayer hands, remembering that we belong to a oneness of being, and we will always belong to that oneness of being. Let's do that again together in whatever way is best for you. We remember the transcendent wonder of the universe, the awe we feel when we gaze at the sky and the wonders of nature. We remember that each of us is inherently worthy and sacred, and nothing can ever take that from us. We remember that we are part of an interdependent, interconnected web, that we can't do this alone, and we need to bind together in community to make this world a more just place. We remember that part of our tradition is action, that we are here to do justice and service together so that we can live in a more loving world. And we come to our center with prayer hands, remembering that we belong to a oneness of being, and we will always belong to that oneness of being. Let's
Sometimes it takes something to get from there to here. Today's first reading is from Embracing Rootedness and Radical Genealogy by Aurora Levins Morales. Raícism, from raíces, or roots, is the practice of rooting ourselves in the real, concrete histories of our people, our families, our local communities, our ethnic communities. It is radical genealogy, history made personal. It is a keeping of accounts. Its intent is to pierce the immense, mind-deadening denial that permeates daily life, that drowns our deepest grief and horror about the founding and ongoing atrocities of racism, class, and patriarchy in endless chatter about trivialities. Oppression buries the actual lives of real and contradictory people in the crude generalizations of bigotry and punishes us for not matching the caricature, refusing all evidence of who we actually are in defiance of its tidy categories. It is a blunt instrument used for bashing not only our dangerous complexities, but also the ancient and permanent fact of our involvement with each other. Raícism, or rootedness, is the choice to bear witness to our specific, contradictory historical identities in relationship to one another. It is an accounting of the debts and assets we have inherited, and acknowledging the precise nature of that inheritance is an act of spiritual and political integrity.
Back in 2020, I attended a training at which the facilitator said, "Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice." What is necessary doesn't always feel peaceful. That is, if we're working with a definition of peace that means calm and untroubled. Peace as the presence of justice requires us to be able to move through chaos and tension and, yes, some conflict. And last month, I remembered this teaching in the context of thinking about my own genealogy. As a white American, I have spent the past 10 years or so coming to understand more and more about what it means to be white in this country, about the privileges that I get from my racial identity, some of which were invisible to me until I learned enough to look for and notice them, about the idea that whiteness is a created category and it's been a moving target throughout US history. Maybe you've heard about books like How the Irish Became White. This is not a category that is about skin pigmentation, even though people claim it is. And when I looked at history, the big movements, the small moments, I have to admit I did so through my idea that all of my ancestors had arrived in the United States in the 19th century, that they were part of waves of farming immigrants from Europe. And so yes, they were part of the land grab that pushed indigenous Americans off of much of their traditional and ancestral lands in the Great Plains. And yes, it is almost certain that my ancestors were taught and said and did pretty racist things toward and about indigenous Americans. But there was this little part of me that said, well, I have some distance from those other parts of US history. But in the last 2 months, I got into doing some genealogical research. And at just the same time, someone in my social media feed shared about a class called Before We Were White, a class for people with European ancestry who wanted to know more about what their ancestors' lives were like before they were taught to be just white Americans. This sounded perfect for me. I was about to dig into some genealogy. I was going to find out where my people had come from. And I wanted to be able to teach my daughter more about the heritage that we held, what the lives of our ancestors might have been like, and how to deepen in that identity and ground in it. And of course, I found some surprises. It turns out that not all of my ancestors arrived in the 19th century. On each side of my family of origin, I have one great-grandparent who is descended from a line of people who came from Europe to North America in the 1600s. So there goes my comfortable distance. And I want to pause here to acknowledge what we heard a little bit of in the story that Reverend Sarah told, that this is a piece of white privilege in the United States. My genealogical research and the records of my ancestors are, largely speaking, those that have been preserved. Now, it is true that if you go back past a certain point, it's mostly the records of my male ancestors, because the patriarchy is real. But still, I am descended from people whose existence was recorded in certain ways that I can access fairly easily now. If you are researching Black ancestors, Indigenous ancestors, you may find that the people in your family history were not recorded with the same respect and care. This is a real piece that must be named in talking about getting into genealogy. As I traced one ancestral line of mine back, I found many generations of people living in North Carolina. One of them was a Confederate soldier in the Civil War. That was uncomfortable. His grandfather fought in the Revolutionary War. That was okay. His father, who lived in Massachusetts, fought in what is called King Philip's War. King Philip's War was named this way because the leader of the Pokanoket Wampanoag at the time, a man named Metacom, was using the name Philip to interact with the British colonists. And when there was armed conflict in 1675 between the colonists and the Wampanoag, it resulted in what is now considered to be the deadliest war in colonial American history. So an unexpected part of history became personal for me in doing this research. I hadn't guessed at all that I was connected to those stories, which I learned a little bit of as part of the landscape during the years I lived in southeastern Massachusetts. I remember reading museum placards about King Philip's War. I had no idea that I had an ancestor who fought in it. And I wondered how it was that I hadn't known this. How had I learned that everybody just sort of arrived in the 19th century? Well, the instructors of this course, before we were white, they pointed out to us that white Americans are encouraged to forget about all kinds of things. Where our ancestors came from, how they connected to the land and the communities they were part of, harms that they endured, and harms that they caused. And again, I want to pause here to note a difference. Because while white people are often tricked or convinced to forget, the histories of Black and Indigenous people have often been intentionally erased and destroyed by those in power. And in some ways, these disconnections from our heritage serve to make us good consumers, which is what capitalism really wants from people of all races. Folks who will buy whatever new thing is advertised, hoping it will solve their problems, because they don't feel connected to larger communities and webs of life and traditions of heritage. And in other ways, this disconnection is about keeping us separate, separate from really feeling and connecting with history, separate from each other. The concept of whiteness in America was created on purpose to keep lower-class laborers in the colonies, who were British and other Europeans and Africans and Indigenous Americans, to keep those people from joining together to protest exploitation by the wealthy. For example, in the earliest days of the Maryland colony, British and African laborers ate and worked and formed relationships together. They lived under similar conditions, and they had the same opportunities when they were free. In other words, any man, because patriarchy, remember, any man who had worked off his contract, whether that was indenture or enslavement, became free. He was able to vote. He was able to enslave others. He was able to marry a person of his choosing, regardless of their national origin. At that time, African men in Maryland could and did vote, could and did enslave others, and could and did marry British women. This was all considered fine and normal. Until in 1861, Maryland passed a law declaring that white women could not marry black men, and therefore created the category of white for the first time on this continent. More laws were passed to create and reinforce divisions. The prohibition of free black men from holding public office. The prohibition of free black men owning guns. The requirement that free white men, when they completed their indenture, the requirement that they be given guns and gunpowder. These laws did not do much to change the economic status of white laborers relative to the wealthy. But what they did serve to do was hide the fact that white and black laborers had much more in common than not. They created a white identity that became more important and more relevant than people's European identity, and which separated white laborers from black and indigenous laborers. And if you want to go deeper into this, you can look up Jacqueline Batalora's work. She is the scholar I learned this from. In this way, the laboring class, who were the vast majority of people in colonial Maryland, were given reasons to mistrust each other. This discouraged them from working together to change the way the wealthy few were profiting from everyone's labor. It is a powerful illustration of what I have been learning in this class. One of our instructors, Chris Crass, says, many of you came into this class with a lens of liberal anti-racism. Liberal anti-racism says, gosh, white people have been jerks a lot in history. Let's try to be less jerky now. And he says, what we're working on here is radical anti-racism. Radical anti-racism says, when you learn to see racism, you see it as a trick that hurts all of us. Now, certainly it hurts some much more than others, but it hurts all of us. It separates us from ourselves, it separates us from each other, and it makes it easier for the powerful few to exploit the rest of us. Hearing this, I was able to begin imagining in new ways that some of my ancestors were people who got tricked into separating themselves from their roots and separating themselves from their neighbors. And part of my work for the presence of justice now is to try to repair at least a little bit of this separation.
Today's second reading is also from Embracing Rootedness and Radical Genealogy by Aurora Levins Morales. Taking full responsibility for our legacy of relationships is empowering and radical. Guilt and denial and the defensive pull to avoid blame require immense amounts of energy and are profoundly immobilizing. Giving them up can be a great relief. Deciding that we are in fact accountable frees us to act. Acknowledging our ancestors' participation in the oppression of others, and this is ultimately true of everyone if you really dig, and deciding to balance the accounts on their behalf leads to greater integrity and less shame, less self-righteousness and more righteousness, humility and compassion, a sense of proportion. At the same time, uncovering the credit side of the accounts, not the suffering, but the solidarity, persistence, love, hard work, creativity, and soul of our forebears is also an obligation. We are responsible for carrying that forward into our own time and for calling our kin to do likewise. For people committed to liberation, to claim descent from the perpetrators is a renewal of faith in human beings. If slavers, invaders, committers of genocide, inquisitors can beget abolitionists, resistance fighters, healers, community builders, then anyone can transform an inheritance of privilege or of victimization into something more fertile than either.
This practice of ancestral recovery, of finding and reconnecting with the history of those who came before us, can be daunting. So I appreciate Aurora Levins Morales' naming that it involves acknowledging our ancestors' participation in the oppression of others. And this is ultimately true of everyone, if you really dig. So often we find history told to us in binaries. Sometimes we hear, well, the white people knew best how to use the land and the other people, so they conquered everybody. Sometimes we hear the white people were awful and they came and destroyed what were otherwise perfect societies of people of color. And neither one of those is true. It's important to be able to say that most people are a mix of virtues and flaws. Most people are focused on taking care of themselves and their family or their community. And it's important to see how the circumstances of their times acted on them and how they acted. That family line of mine with the soldiers, including the man who fought against Wampanoag people, the first person in that line to arrive in North America was a man named Ralph Hill. Ralph was born in England and he sailed to Massachusetts. I know from the records that he was in Massachusetts by 1638 because he got married. Later, he and 14 other men petitioned the colonial leadership for permission to start a new town. And in 1654, they founded the town of Billerica, Massachusetts. Billerica, according to my research, was apparently notable in colonial Massachusetts because the land was relatively equitably divided among the families who established it. Now, Ralph and I probably wouldn't agree about the autonomy of women. And Ralph was certainly part of colonial land theft from the Massachusetts and Wampanoag people. But I can find a bit of what Ralph did that I do agree with and want to uphold. Among the people that he did see himself as being in community with, it seems that he wanted to be fair. That is a heritage that I can carry forward, while I always work to expand the circle of community beyond the people Ralph might have been able to identify. And here's a little bit more that I think Ralph and I agree on. In his will, he left some of his property to the town to create a burying ground. It was a way to take care of the community and to tend relationships even with those who have died. And today, in Billerica, Massachusetts, there is a hiking park known as the Ralph Hill Conservation Area. The park consists of 61 acres of forest, wetlands, and rock formations bordering on the Concord River. It has a beaver pond and nesting areas for birds native to the region. And I wish I had known about it when I lived out there, because I would have liked to visit. Thinking about Ralph and all these other hills in my ancestry, I ask myself what we have in common and where we differ. And it helps me ground myself in a few things. First, it reminds me to have the humility that whatever I am doing today that I am pretty sure is progressive and the right thing, like Ralph dividing up the land equitably, I will inevitably be followed by people who look back on me and cannot believe what I just went along with. I can sit here in 2024 and say, Ralph, come on, man, women are people, and cut it out with the land theft. And what will someone be saying about me 100 years or 400 years from now? They will not be saying that I was perfect. And second, thinking about all these ancestors, the ways they were tricked into going along with systemic racism, the way they engaged in the con of thinking that being white and going along with the system was the best thing for their family, well, the best legacy that I can create for them now is to try to live in true solidarity, as deep and as wide as I can make it. My ancestors were people who left Europe and came to North America seeking safety and freedom and a good life for their children. I understand seeking those things. They got trapped in a premise that said, now that you're here, if you learn to be white, you'll be entitled to get a little of what you want, and your life will be slightly better than the lives of others. They were part of terrible wrongs, some of them very personally, and some of them as beneficiaries of systems of oppression. And I don't know much yet about how or if they questioned those systems in their days, although I hope to find out more. But I do understand wanting safety and freedom and a good life for your children. And so, like the movement from peace as the absence of conflict to peace as the presence of justice, here is how I am moving my understanding of those things now, on behalf of my ancestors and for those yet to come. I want the safety of a society that truly cares for everyone. I want healthcare and housing and food and respect for the natural world. I want the freedom of each and every person to express their truest self without stigma or prejudice. And I want a good life for my child. I want her to know the truths of her ancestry. I want her to hold those truths with compassion and empathy. And I want her to use those truths to help her live in community and solidarity with others. As I get further into this work, I'm grateful to know that folks who are farther along have created organizations like Coming to the Table, an organization that supports, quote, all who wish to acknowledge and heal wounds from racism that is rooted in the United States history of slavery. The work of Coming to the Table is about creating relationships, including those of what they call linked descendants, Those are pairs of people alive today who are descended from an enslaved person and an enslaving person, like Pat and David in our story. Wherever you are in connecting with your ancestry, whether you know a lot of details or simply broad strokes, whether you don't even feel the call to do that right now, I hope you'll join me in this life-giving work of making who and how we are now into the realization of the best hopes of those who came before us. Let us take our inheritances and transform them into something more. Let's share a moment together in silent reflection.
Let's rise and join together in singing hymn number 16. 'Tis a gift to be simple.
If you are online and have a chalice or candle, please join me as we extinguish our chalice, which actually, as an overachiever, has already gone out, with the words of Adam Slate. Be kind, be brave, be just, be merciful, be hopeful. This is how we keep the chalice flame burning until we are together again to light it anew. Go in peace, go in joy, go in love.